Hi, this is Dr. Tony Alvarado, and I want to welcome you back to the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast. I am ultra excited about this year of podcasting with you. This is the last episode of the year that you are listening to or watching. We have now completed with this episode 14 seasons of this podcast. Yes, 14 full seasons of the Harmonize Your Life podcast with Dr. Tony Alvarado. We started this podcast in 2020, right at the top of the pandemic. And we have been going all of 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. And now, can you believe it? We are at the end of 2024. And we are closing out this year of podcasting with another intriguing, informational, inspirational, motivational podcast conversation and a dynamic guest that I'll be bringing to you in just a moment. And so I want you to just sit back, enjoy the conversation. We've started the month of December already with Dr. Jamie Edie Chisholm, and we talked about thoughtful transitions and grief. As you know, we are in the holiday season. This is the month of December. And so we are in the holiday season. And what we're going to be talking about today is coping strategies for seasonal grief. And we know that a seasonal depression, and grief, because we know that everybody is not rejoicing during the holidays. And there are some things that come along with the season that we need to know how to manage, and we need to know how to navigate in our mental health and as we walk through this season. As we close out this year, I wanted us to make sure that we were healthy and whole and ready to go into 2025. And so this podcast conversation, I want you to share it far and wide, because I know that it is going to help everybody and everyone who taps in and listen to what our guests will share with us on today. So I'll be right back with our next guest right after this. All right. So I want to welcome another new guest, a new voice to the Harmonize Your Life podcast. This month, we've had two brand new women of God, speakers, theologians, scholars who've come into the podcast studio with me. And I am so delighted. I remember the first time I met our guest, and I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment more formally, but when I met our guest today, Dr. Nicole Z. Robertson, when I met her, the first time I heard her speak, I knew that I had to have her on the Harmonize Your Life podcast. She blessed me so during that time, and I know that she is going to be a blessing to us. So let me just quickly introduce our guest to you. Dr. Nicole Robertson is a native of New Orleans, Louisiana. She is an assistant professor and director of clinical mental health counseling at Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I met her. Dr. Robertson is a nationally certified counselor and Maryland State Board licensed clinical mental health counselor. She received her training as a clinical mental health therapist and as a counselor, educator, and supervisor from the Pastoral Counseling Department at Loyola University, Maryland in Baltimore, Maryland. Dr. Robertson is a member of several professional counselor organizations, and her research and teaching interests include spiritually integrated counseling, African Americans' amenability to mental health therapy, and exploring and examining coping strategies employed when psychological stress is encountered among African Americans. Dr. Robertson also has a small mental health counseling practice. And so I want you all to help me welcome our sister and our friend to the Harmonize Your Life community, Dr. Nicole Robertson. Welcome, Dr. Nicole.
Well, thank you so much. It is my honor and my pleasure, and I believe a blessing to be here. Thank you, Dr. Alvarado, for this opportunity to share with your audience, to share with the folks a little bit about ways to care for themselves in this time and in this season. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And so when I met you, Dr. Nicole, I knew, as I said in my introductory comments, I knew I had to have you on the podcast. You know, the Bible says, deep calleth unto deep. So when I heard you speak, of course, my passion for wellness, for self-care, for seeing us whole, spirit, soul, and body, automatically connected with you. So first time I heard Dr. Nicole speak, I'm completing the Compelling Preaching Initiative. They are at Christian Theological Seminary. They're in Indianapolis, Indiana, and that's where we met. They brought you in to do a session with us on deep breathing. And we'll say a little bit more about that a little later on in our conversation. But I knew in that session, yeah, I got to get her on the podcast. You're the type of voice that we have hosted and that our community has come to enjoy and learn from. And so I thank you for this partnership, for you coming in and being our dialogue partner, especially in this holiday season.
Yes, much needed in the season. So I welcome just the opportunity to share and to be here to share some information, to share some things that people can be aware of, that they can use to impact their lives daily, particularly during this time.
So talk to us about your work as a clinical mental health therapist. What was your motivation? Is there a particular story, or do you have a particular, is it personal for you? Talk to us about why you do this work.
So it is a work that I believe is a calling, a vocation, a little bit that I oftentimes, but not intentionally, but sometimes I forget to include that, oh, by the way, I'm ordained as a minister in the Baptist church as well. So my story related to mental health begins there. In my experience of being an associate minister and having the responsibility of pastoral care. A part of that responsibility was counseling some of the individuals within the congregation, and having finished seminary, recognizing that my skills in counseling were limited. I only had 2 classes, and the issues and concerns that individuals were bringing within the context of pastoral care were very enormous and overwhelming at points in time. And I struggled with, how do I help them? How do I help an individual who's bringing a concern to me that may be very traumatic, such as the loss of a pregnancy, or dealing with fertility issues, or the loss of a child, or the loss of a parent, anyone, or a loss of a job? How do I deal with that with having only experienced 2 courses in counseling in my MDiv program? And now these individuals, I have to use the gift of referral to refer them to a therapist. Now they have to retell this story and re-experience sometimes this particular trauma. How could I help? I know that I'm not called to be a lead pastor or a senior pastor. I know I have gifts of administration. I know I can lead. I love to serve people. So how can I help? How can I assist? And just in those experiences, I felt a need and a desire to want to be able to help people with their mental health needs because I saw it as another aspect of their wholeness. How can I really minister to a person spiritually or holistically if I don't address all the parts of who they are?
All the things. Yeah. All
Yes.
those parts. And because we are multifaceted, and we're not just spiritual beings, but we're physical beings, we are mental beings, we're emotional beings, right? Relational beings, and all of that in there, the wholeness, the holistic approach.
Yes.
You said two things that I want to kind of take. I want us to explore just a little bit. Two things you said. One, you talked about the fact that you were working in the local church, right, as a associate minister.
Yes.
And so oftentimes, so I'm gonna play the devil's advocate real quick.
Yes.
I know the answer, but I need to poke the bear just a little bit. So you mean to tell me just praying about it ain't enough?
Praying about it works. However, and when there are issues that persist to the fact that an individual becomes unable to function, they then need some additional care or professional care. I like to share it this way. I said, everybody deals with stuff. I see mental health issues and things that we might find challenging and overwhelming as being stuff. But sometimes that stuff becomes overwhelming to the point where we can't help ourselves anymore. And it is okay to not be okay and to ask for and seek help.
Additional help. So we can have Jesus and a therapist, right?
We can. You stole my thunder. I was just about to say Jesus and a therapist works really well. If I had to pull scripture, we could look at different ways where there was counsel that was administered or sought out because issues and concerns were being overwhelming. Moses was one of those examples where his father-in-law said, you can't do this work all by yourself. Why don't you get people to help you within this context to be able to hear the concerns of the people? And so that's an example of how when that stuff becomes overwhelming for us, it's okay to seek help. So pray about it, yes, but also it may be that through your prayer, you find out that you need some professional care as well.
And so, and you also mentioned that before you went and got your training as a therapist, you also gave people the gift of referral.
Yes.
And so, there are people that are listening that may be in ministry but do not have those skills. And I imagine even with you as a therapist, there's still times that you have to refer people, right?
Yes.
So talk to us about the importance of gifting people that whole referring people, because sometimes we feel like we have to be the answer for everybody.
Yes. And I think that pastors overall work very, very hard. They carry a heavy load of administrative responsibilities, of functioning within the leadership of shepherding individuals within the context of the church. And then not only pastoral care duties and responsibilities, but then the responsibilities of providing some type of counseling. And so when we find ourselves as spiritual leaders at a limit to our own capabilities, I think that's when the gift of referral becomes a very wonderful tool that we can use. And so that gift of referral, by that I mean being able to say and know your capabilities and limitations as a pastor, to say, you know what, this person has come to me for about 5 different sessions of counseling, talking about concerns and issues that I'm finding myself limited with resources that I can assist them with. Who among us in our congregation or in the community is a trained and licensed mental health care provider or or a counselor that might be able to assist this person a little bit further than my capabilities allow. It's almost like a great leader. A great leader doesn't have to be able to do everything. But if that great leader is able to surround herself with individuals who can help carry out the vision or carry out the task, that's what we want. And so that's what I understand, and how I see that gift of referral is understanding when I've reached my limit of what I'm able to do based on my own training, referral is very important. Another thing that I'd like to add to that is that we also need to know, we learn in our training as a counselor, as a therapist, that we should practice within the area of our competency. So that means, what have we been trained to do? And what we've been trained to do, that's where we should work. Oftentimes, and this is not true for all pastors, but oftentimes, as it was my experience, I only had 2 counseling courses in my divinity program. And so that was limiting me on what I was able to do. And in our quasi-litigious society, when we are providing counsel to people, we can become liable for the things that we share with them and the things that we encourage them to do. And so if something were to happen in that capacity, and I were not trained to be able to help people with the issues and concerns that they were bringing, I could be liable for what may have happened for that individual. And so that gift of referral not only helps the client or the congregation, the person in the congregation, but it also helps to protect me from some of the legal issues and ramifications of me practicing outside of the realm of what I understand to do.
That's good. And can you expand that even to those of us that may be listening, that may not necessarily be in ministry, may not be a pastor, but just a family member, a friend? How do we, because sometimes in our families, things come up and we become that person everybody come to, right?
Yes.
Big mama, a mama, or sister, or whatever. So how do we handle that even with our family and friends? Not necessarily in a professional realm, but just in a familiar or family or friend domain.
Yeah. I think sometimes I think that word capacity keeps coming back up for me. We have to, our family and our friends, I am some ways that for my family. And that probably was another element that was drawn.
And I'm sure a lot of the women that are listening to this podcast,
that's who we are.
We're the go-to in our families, right?
Yes. And so being that go-to in your family, knowing, I would say knowing your limits is important as well, but also prefacing what you're doing or talking to them with, here's what I would suggest, but it may take you thinking about what's going to work for you, right? I may not always be giving you the information that's going to work directly for you, because I'm thinking about what may have worked for me in the past. And so how then does it apply to you? So often my nieces or my nephews will come to me and they'll say, Auntie, I'm thinking about XYZ, what's your thoughts? And I'll give them my thoughts, right? And I'm saying, ultimately, though, it's your decision of how you might want to do this. Here are a few things that you can do. And I'm not going to judge you either way that you go, but you have the information. It's going to be your decision how you move forward with it. Now, the other thing is, sometimes it's very hard for us as being the people who everybody comes to or the go-to person to put boundaries in place. When we can't manage our own things and everyone is coming to us, how do we help kind of, if you will, contain, if you will, those particular issues and concerns? Sometimes we have to have boundaries to say, okay, here is what I can do, right?
Because sometimes we take on too much, right?
Yes, we take on too much and then cause our own selves to have health-related issues, mental health concerns. We're having anxiety about a decision that a loved one needs to make, and they're asleep. And so what are we doing? We are carrying more than they are carrying. And so we have to kind of put some boundaries in place and really share with them. Here's what I recommend or could suggest, but ultimately the decision is yours.
Mm-hmm.
And let me know how you decide. I'll pray for you, pray with you, encourage you along the way, but know that the decision ultimately is yours. So I think that boundary and capacity element is very important for us, particularly as Black women.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there because that's where I was going to go next. What are the implications of our gender and our ethnicity as Black women, race and gender and all that? How does that play into our ability or impact our ability to seek help when we need it?
So it plays a major role. So just a little bit of statistics around African Americans or Blacks in general. So there was a study that was done in 2022 by Mental Health of America. Mental Health of America is looking at individuals and how they are reporting their mental health issues and or concerns. And so when we think about the Black population overall in the United States is 13.4%. Of those 13.4% of individuals, 16% of those individuals were reporting mental health concerns in 2022. That's 7 million people in the population of the US, more than the population of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia combined. And these people are all reporting mental health issues. And the majority of those mental health issues are going untreated. And we know just by statistics that probably the majority of those individuals, those 7 million people, I would say 2/3 of them are women. Some of the things that get in the way of that are our issues around stigma and mistrust. Stigma related to mental health concerns and mistrust of medical or mental health practitioners. The stigma is one, I don't want to say that I have a mental health issue or concern because that says that something is wrong with me internally, right? Something I did, something my parents did that's a result of this issue that I'm facing. I don't want to go and seek out mental health services because I grew up in a household where we were told what goes on in the house stays in the house. And so no matter what I'm facing, I am not going to go and seek help. Another issue, particularly for Black women, would be this trope or this identity of a strong Black woman, where my identity and my strength is linked to what I can do and how I can push through. And so to seek any type of mental health services, even to cry, says that I'm weak. And so once again, not seeking services as a result of that stigma. The mistrust comes into play as well because we know the history of issues related to medical issues and concerns where individuals that were Black or brown or BIPOC presentation have been mistreated because of both implicit and explicit biases in the medical profession, and then intentionally sacrificed in research in order to promote the furtherance of science and research without their permission. So can I trust these mental health care providers? And I think one of the other things that prevent, or probably these 4 other factors that prevent individuals from seeking it out, particularly Black females, are issues related to availability, meaning are mental health services available? Are they affordable? Meaning, can my insurance cover it? Or can I pay the cost out of pocket? Is it accessible to me? Meaning, if I don't have a car, is there transportation that will get me there? Is the agency or private practice practitioner available in my community or neighborhood? And then this last thing that's very true for us as Black women and as Blacks in general is alliance or representation. And so what do I mean by that? Alliance or representation would say, when I go in the room and see this mental health professional, will they look like me? And will they understand at some level the issues that I am facing just by coming into the room? And how will I build a relationship with them as I try to navigate these issues? But I believe that there's hope in that. Can we access these resources for help? I believe we can, if we can overcome some of the issues related to stigma and related to mistrust by being educated and becoming more aware and knowledgeable of what's available to us, particularly within our communities.
Well, that's some good information. And before we're done, if you have any resources where women or those listening can at least find some of those services where, because that is a real concern, of course, financially cannot afford it, but sometimes it's just not even knowing where to go.
Mhm.
So if you have a website or two that you want our listeners to go to, I would like for you to share that before we're done on today. So let's talk a little bit about the idea of seasonal depression. So it's December, and some people deal with what's known as seasonal depression just around the fact that it's daylight. We don't have as much daylight,
Mhm.
right? And
Yes.
so some people deal with, I know my daughter, when she moved from Georgia to Columbus, Ohio, she was
Mhm.
like, I just noticed, because it gets darker earlier, it's she said it's so gray here, right?
Yeah.
And she found that it made her mood inky and down. She felt down a lot because of it. Um, and it just zapped her of her energy. So can you talk to us about seasonal depression and even layering on top of that the holidays? Because ironically, there's depression that come with the holidays. We know everybody's not excited and happy during this time for various reasons,
Mhm.
um, grief and missing loved ones, and then add on that the whole seasonal depression thing. So what are some coping strategies? First, explain
Yeah.
what seasonal depression is, and then maybe lead us into some coping strategies for such issues.
Wonderful question. Thank you so much, Dr. Tony, for that. So we might hear it being identified as seasonal depression, but
Mhm,
also in the mental health field or counseling arena, we'll hear it being identified as seasonal affective disorder. So it being a true element of a diagnosis, if you will, as it relates to mental health concerns,
mhm,
where, as you describe, at this point in the season, the days of daylight are shorter, the nights are longer, physical activity kind of wanes, if you will, because
mhm,
there's lack of daytime
mhm, mhm,
light. Sleep becomes a more go-to issue.
mhm,
All the things that we kind of snuggle and want to, warm up to are the things that we have a proclivity to address
mhm,
rather than some of the more active ways that we're engaged.
mhm,
Along with that are symptoms around depression,
mhm,
which might show up as a disinterest in those things that we had an interest in once before. It might show up as not taking care of our own personal hygiene and things of that nature.
mhm,
Or it could look like I'm sleeping a lot or I'm not eating appropriately.
mhm,
Or it could look like I'm having these moments where I'm staying up all night, right? And
mhm,
sleeping during the day. And
mhm,
so there's various symptoms that might show themselves, and my family members or those around me might reflect on, you don't seem like you're yourself. And
mhm,
so what's happening with you or what's happening for you? I say in these seasons, along with that, separate from that, or even in unison or existing right alongside with that, may be elements of grief. So for a lot of individuals that have lost loved ones, either within the context of this year, within the context of past years, they're
mhm,
still grieving. It may be that for them, because resources are limited, that they normally travel to see loved ones for the holiday, but maybe that's limited this year. And so
mhm,
they are in a place where they're trying to figure out how to adjust where they are. So they're
mhm,
experiencing some type of loss, some type of missing of loved ones, and some type of missing of resources, some type of missing of all the things that would make this holiday season, quote unquote, happy and bright.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that one of the things that we can do as the loved ones, as the pastors, as the ministers, as the sister friends, as the family members, is that we can really be aware of what's happening with our loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
You have not talked to a loved one, and you normally talk. My sister and I talk every day, at least twice a day.
Okay.
And so if I don't hear from her all day, or she doesn't hear from me all day, she'll
Mm-hmm.
know either I'm in classes and I'm teaching, and so my long days are Mondays, and she may not hear from me until Tuesday. But if she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
hear from me by Tuesday, she's calling. She's calling
Okay.
2 or 3 times to say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? What's happening today? I didn't hear from you." And in the same way, being aware of our loved ones for whom we've seen, noticing that we've seen a change in their behavior. And
Mm-hmm.
so being aware of what's happening with them and checking in with them,
Okay.
understanding that grief and or depression are really difficult during this season, and having someone to check on you, even if they don't answer the phone, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they'll just say, yeah, I'm not answering the phone. But sending them a text message, and knowing that on some of our devices, it can tell when you've read the
Yeah.
text
Yeah.
message.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
person knows that you're checking in with them, and usually
Mm-hmm.
check back in with
Mm-hmm.
you. Also saying and acknowledging or being aware that grief and or depression is not going to just go away by
Mm-hmm.
telling an individual, okay, you've been this way for the last week, you got to get over this. No, allow them to be able to bear their grief and deal with their grief, be
Mm-hmm.
able to talk to someone about it, maybe share some things with them,
Mm-hmm.
check in with them, acknowledge that these things are going on.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they can't get out of bed. So maybe you're going over and you're dropping off a meal to them. Maybe you're either, if not doing their chores in their house, you're hiring someone to come in and do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it is that you take them, you say, hey, I know you've been in the house for the last week or two. Let's go for a drive. Let's go do this. Let's go do something, where they understand that you are aware of what they're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not telling them to brush it off and jump out of it. And you are giving them what I also call another gift of presence. You're able to be there with them, know that they're not by themselves, reassure them, if you will, of God's presence with them, and then in
Mm-hmm.
human form, you're
Yeah.
there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so those
Mm-hmm.
are some of the things that I would encourage individuals to think about for individuals during this season. Don't rush them through their process.
Oh, that is so important. Don't rush people through their process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Say more about that.
I try not to say do not, and I try to say avoid in the proper
Okay.
language,
Okay.
but I
Okay.
say do not is what came up, and I say that because very often individuals place symptoms of depression
Mm-hmm.
and or compound with grief that might be complex on
Mm-hmm.
the timeline or within this linear
Mm-hmm.
pattern that
Okay.
says grief has to happen in this way,
Yeah.
and after a year, you should be over it.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And that is not going to be the case for most individuals. I would say that if you are not processing that grief, if you are not allowing yourself to grieve, then you're
Mm-hmm.
suppressing it. And so giving yourself a pace and a time to work through that, whatever it might look like, going through, while it may be dated information, Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, right? Going through denial, bargaining,
Mm-hmm.
accepting, anger, and those stages, and even to a sixth stage of meaning making. What does all this mean? Is
Yeah.
very important for individuals that are dealing with grief. And
Yeah.
if at the holiday time that wave of grief comes across you again because you're missing a loved one or missing time with family or missing loved ones in general, allow yourself space for that. It may be time that you journal and talk about it. It may be that you do something that reminds you of that person, that brings joy
Mm-hmm.
for you and to you. You can do that. If you're dealing with depression during this season and time, I think it's important that you know your own symptoms and know your own self. That if it is to a place where you are unable to function in your normal daily activities for about 2 weeks or so, where it keeps you really in a stage of just not doing anything, I would encourage individuals to seek help, either through their local primary care physician, kind of making an appointment to say, hey, this is how I've been feeling. They could get a referral from their primary care physician to maybe a local mental health specialist, or to to a class or something like that for individuals that are dealing with depression during this season. Keep in touch with those whom you already know. We know the individuals in our lives who are dealing with grief, who are dealing with depression. It may be helpful as a faith community to acknowledge and have.
That's good. I was going to ask you, how do we hold space?
Yes.
In our community, in our churches, in our families that are dealing without being intrusive. You know what I mean?
Yes. So having a space to welcome individuals, saying, you know, we're having this space. You're not obligated to come, but we will be here. We will be here supporting one another. And whatever that might look like for your particular faith community or congregation, maybe it's just a space for prayer and for music, and I light a candle. Or maybe I'm having within the context of some Asian cultures, they'll light a balloon, or I can't remember what the name of it is, and they'll let it go into the sky as a point of remembrance for that loved one. And so what ways could you honor if it's grief? If you're dealing with depression during this season, would it be helpful for that faith community or space to have a group where you could come and talk about during this season? We have this group for these 4 weeks that you can come in and talk about issues and concern. We can build skills of what we can do in order to help ourselves manage our depression and or our symptoms during this season. What do we need to do to check in? I think that if an individual is particularly in a crisis mode, they want to know the emergency contact numbers, such as 988, which is an emergency crisis hotline. They want to know 911 as I'm having a medical or a mental health emergency and I need to be connected to a resource. If within your local community there is a non-emergency crisis response team that you know the number. So in some cities or some states, it's 211, and you can call to get that information. But all of those things having those resources available. But I think the most important part for individuals that are dealing with grief in this season and that are dealing with seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression is that their community comes in around them and support them.
Okay. Good stuff. Wow. You just gave me some ideas and some things that maybe I can do even for my own congregation in this season. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You know, when I met you, of course, it was in the CPI program, the Compelling Preaching Initiative program there at CTS. And you did a thing for us on deep breathing.
Yes.
The practice of deep breathing. Of course, that was one of the things that resonated with me because I have practiced deep breathing myself. I've had classes on it through my self-care network. But I wanted to know, could you share a little bit about the whole practice of breathing this season and how important it is for us as it relates to grief and depression?
Yes. So this is a wonderful question and kind of comment to expound on. I think very often when individuals think about breathing, they're like, oh, I don't have time to do that. Well, if you didn't have time to do that, to breathe, then you wouldn't be here. Because breathing,
that means you are dead.
Yes, right. I don't have time to do that. Wait, what do you mean you don't have time to do that? You're doing it right now. Breathing is this innate body function. We don't have to do anything in order to breathe, right? We breathe just by taking in a breath and letting it go without even observing that we're doing it. And I think it's important that we know that it's not work, quote unquote, to breathe. Sometimes we just have to take the time and be mindful of our breathing.
Okay.
So one of the things I think that's important to know, if folks need scripture around it, we can go to Genesis and say how God breathed into us and we became a living being. So that breath has not ceased to exist. That breath is still there. We're still breathing. Sometimes that breath needs to be refreshed, right? And so by refreshing, or by, I like to use the word regulating, we get our system, our nervous systems back in place. Two parts of our nervous system that require breathing. When we get to a place where we are anxious or we're feeling like we have to protect ourselves, defend ourselves, that is our sympathetic nervous system telling us there's danger and you need to be on alert. And so our breathing may become increased. Our heart palpitations may increase as well. We may begin to sweat. We may begin to do this fight, flight, or fawn response. And so that's our sympathetic nervous system telling us there's danger. Oftentimes, where we are in our places as in society today, we stay in that heightened sense of alarm. And for credible reasons, right? We understand within the context of these United States, of where we live in our current culture and social political environment, that sometimes we stay in that state of defense, fighting, needing to protect ourselves. That's not very healthy for our hearts. That's not very healthy for our mental health. That's not very healthy for our spirits. Where we want to be is in a state where we are at rest and able to digest. That is what we might identify as our parasympathetic nervous system, where when we're breathing, we allow proper breathing, I should say, we allow oxygen to flow to all the parts of our body appropriately. We allow our breathing to be at a normal pace, and that fight, flight, or freeze response calms down. And so one way that we can do that is by putting into practice breathing. There's literature and there's work out there that talks about and how we can be mindful of our breathing just as we wake up in the morning. And do a 4-7-8 practice. 4, where you're taking an inhale breath for a count of 4. You're holding it for a count of 7 seconds. So 4 seconds, 7 seconds, then exhaling for 8. Really to get your breathing to a, if you will, a syncopated or a normal rhythm. So that you're not in an alert state. So it would be something that I tell clients to practice. When I'm seeing clients or in between clients, I take the time, if you will, to do 2 things: go to the restroom, wash my hands, and then breathe. Because I want to be able to come into the next session or the next phase refresh. So I would encourage listeners at this point in time to take a moment to breathe. To take a breath in, to hold it, and then to exhale. Being able to do that, as my trainer does with me, and elements of 3s, gives me some space to then be able to think about, what do I need to do next? What's before me? So it's while people say, oh, this is a mindfulness element, this is something that's new, I was like, breathing is not new. You've been doing it since an infancy.
But it's that intentional. I like what you said. That
being
intentional
intentional about it is very important. So
and
that's
aware.
my thoughts. Hmm?
And aware.
Yes, yes, yes,
Mm-hmm. That's
yes.
mm-hmm.
So those are my thoughts about it. It's very important that we practice it. I try to, when I get nervous,
Mm-hmm.
I try just to say, take a deep breath in.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
we do it sometimes with grounding activities so that we're being aware of our breathing, but also being aware of our senses so
Mm-hmm.
that if it were the grass was nice outside, I would put my feet in grass to
Mm-hmm.
ground myself with
Mm-hmm.
earth and creation and then breathe in and notice with my senses, what do I see? What do I smell? What do I hear? What do I feel? What do I taste?
Mm-hmm.
To be other ways that I can help my breathing kind of calm me down
Mm-hmm.
in ways that I get my systems back in order. And when those systems are back in order, then that fight, flight, and freeze response is normalized, and my body can do its work of resting
Mm-hmm.
and digesting or processing, I say as well.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Wow, this is such good stuff.
Yes.
Such good stuff. I pray that all of you all that are listening are getting these tips and are able to apply them. This is what I like. It's so practical. The things that you're sharing are so practical, and I hope that I know that our listeners are being helped. Dr. Nicole, I want to share with everybody how they can reach out to you. You do have a practice, right? So
I do have a small practice, licensed in the state of Maryland, so I am able to see people within the state of Maryland. Of course, they can reach out to me through my email address, if you will. That is nzinarobertson@gmail.com. If they're interested in
let me write
seeing,
that. Let me make a banner for that.
yes,
And Zena Robertson.
Nzina Robertson at gmail.com. That's one way to get in touch with me with regards to counseling services if you live in the state of Maryland. I am working on being able to accept clients within the context of Indiana, and so that is something in progress. However, if you would like to reach me with other questions and my social media
Yeah, I think
opportunities,
I have you here on Facebook.
great. You have me on Facebook there,
Uh-huh.
Nicole
And,
Robertson, and on the gram a little bit as well, a
mhm.
little bit of
NZ
thread.
Robertson, and
Yes,
also on Blue Sky and Threads at
yes,
NZ Robertson. And then I also put CTS website there. If someone
yes,
is interested in taking a course there with you, or just reaching out to you there as well. So I just put the website to Christian Theological Seminary for those of you. That's where Dr. Nicole is currently serving full time on the faculty there.
yes.
So I just wanted to put that up, cts.edu, and just make sure that people are able to find you in all those spaces. I want to do a little station identification for those of you that are watching and listening to this podcast. You are listening to the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast with your host, Dr. Tony G. Alvarado. You can find us on Spotify and on YouTube. I always put my YouTube channel up, the Dr. Tony G. Alvarado, because we're working on getting more subscribers to the YouTube channel. Go to my YouTube channel, you all, and like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything to just hit the subscribe button, and you'll be notified every time a new episode of the podcast is uploaded. I want to encourage the women who are listening to join the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network. You can go to my website at drtonyalvarado.com, and you can join the network there through my Patreon account. And when you do that, you are able to come into Tea Time with Dr. Tony and other classes and things that we offer. You know what, Dr. Nicole, I want to get you to do a deep breathing class for us for the
Yes,
network in 2025. I'll get with you offline
yes.
about having you come into Zoom. And those of you that are part of the network, will be able to take part in that course and other things that we offer through the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network. And those of you that are checking me out here on YouTube, you see I have on my self-care hoodie, one of our hoodies. Go to my website at drtonyalvarado.com and you can go to the shop there and you'll see it's hoodie season, it's sweatshirt season. We have all of our bling t-shirts, our self-care hoodies and self-care t-shirts, our bling t-shirts, our fitness apparel is there. Go to the to my website at drtonyalvarado.com and order you some fitness gear. Y'all know how I am about fitness and exercise and working out, and you can be cute while you work out. All right. I also want to let you know that we are taking applications right now for the Intentional Self-Care Program. If you're interested in being in the 2025 cohort of my Intentional Self-Care Program, it's a 12-month program where we work specifically with a small cohort of women. We don't take more than 12 women through a year program where we work with you as a cohort, as a group, and individually on your own personal self-care, health, wellness, fitness, work-life harmony goals. Whatever it is that you want to work on for 2025, we coach you as a group and individually in that program. And so we want you to know that that is available. And if you're interested and you would like the information for that, email me at hello@drtonyalvarado.com and we will get that application to you so we can set you up for a coaching conversation and get you ready to be a part of the 2025 cohort. Again, our guest on today has been Dr. Nicole Robertson. Dr. Nicole Robertson has been our interlocutor for this session. She's been a wonderful dialogue partner. Closing out our last podcast conversation of 2024.
Yes.
Closing out our last. This is our last, you all. Can you believe it? 2024 is over. All right. When we see you all again after this, it'll be 2025. And so, but I want to thank Dr. Nicole Robertson for coming in and helping us close out the year through the holidays, helping us manage this season of holidays. Some may be dealing with seasonal grief or seasonal depression, or just may be dealing with depression all year long. It doesn't matter. I thank God for gifts like Dr. Nicole Robertson that can help us navigate these murky waters, and so that we can come out and we can thrive, even though we are going through grief and maybe even depression. Okay. Yes. Dr. Robertson, will you just give us one final word of encouragement as we prepare to sign off?
Yes. I think during this season, it is important that you take care of yourselves, that you make taking care of you a priority and a habit, that I encourage you to deal with the things that you're dealing with. Avoid works of suppression of issues and feelings that you're encountering, because that which you do not process, you will suppress. And when you suppress something, it eventually implodes or erodes in parts of your life. So take care of yourselves, make yourself a priority, do things that you enjoy during this season. And if nothing else, talk to someone when the stuff overwhelms you. It's okay to have Jesus and a therapist.
Oh my goodness. And it's okay not to be okay, right?
Yes. And it's okay not to be okay. Yes.
Even in this holiday season.
Even in this season.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you again, Dr. Nicole, for coming in and helping us close out the year with such a dynamic conversation. And I pray that all of our listeners were blessed by our conversation on today. All right, everybody, we'll see you all in 2025. Reach out to me, email me, go to my website, join the network, purchase your Harmony apparel, fitness apparel, join the network, sign up for the Intentional Self-Care Program. 2025 is going to be an amazing year through this Harmonize Your Life self-care network. And I want you to be a part of everything God is doing in and through this network. We'll see you soon again on the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast with your host, Dr. Tony G. Alvarado. See you in 2025.